So, good morning, my dear friends. So, good morning, my dear friends. So I am Dr. Santhosh Babu, IAS here. 1995 batch, Tamil Nadu Kada. I took PRs in the year 2020. I'm here as your Unacademy educator on public administration. So, the whole idea is to teach you the optional public administration. Right? This is the optional. It's a very easy optional for you. So please join my plus classes. Usually it's from 7:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. It may change, but of course my entire schedule will be available. Please join. The whole idea is to ensure that you get around 350 marks out of 500 in your optional subjects. And this is a very, very easy subject, not at all difficult for you to understand or grasp. Maybe it requires an initial grounding, which you can do in the first, 150 hours. And then if you keep repeating it for 2-3 times, then this should become a very, very easy optional for you. And especially, you should be able to capture what's called the public administration vocabulary. So, you don't use words other than that's what's mentioned by the thinkers or either the texts. Of course, you may construct the sentences. The important thing is that you don't bring your own original theories. The theories of thinkers are there in Prasad, in Mohit Bhattacharya, in Fadia. So paper 1, paper 2, etc. Anyways, let's crack it. You're on an Unacademy platform. I'm Dr. Santhosh Babu on the YouTube. Now, if you've been following me, you would have seen that we have taken all the theories of public administration. And we had divided the theories into 4 categories. And this is the 5th category and 6th category that we're looking at. So these are approaches basically, the systems theory and the contingency theory. But before that, let me take you through what we learned in theories of administration. So theories of organization or theories of administration. One was classical theories. So classical theories of administration. Second was neoclassical. Neoclassical theories. Third was behavioral theories. And fourth are post-behavioral theories. This is the easiest way to classify. Okay. And for you to think and write is easy because this is very logical. So in classical theories, we had looked at 1, the scientific management theory of Taylor. Right? You remember that. And then you had what's called the administrative management theory of Henry Fayol. Right? And then you had the classical theories themselves by Urwick and Gulick. If you remember, Gulick came with what's called the post-corp, POSDCORB. Theories of Urwick and Gulick. Right? And fourth was the most important theory is the bureaucratic theory. Theory by Max Weber. Now, if you look at the classical theories, they treated the organization as a huge machine and the human beings who work there as parts of the machine. There was no emotion, there was no love, there was no affection, nothing. They just had to do what they were told to do. So they were given what is called tasks. So if the tasks were performed efficiently, the most important thing in any organization is to ensure 3 E's: economy, efficiency, economy, and effectiveness. And all these classical theories, they have what's called principles of organization. The principles of organization were made all these human beings who were working there as machines. So these may be called the mechanistic theories of organization. So they basically depended on, the classical theories depended on what are called structure. They were very particular about the structure of the organization. It's only if you look at the classical theories, you can simply mention that the classical theories define organization as a physical structure constituted by hierarchies. Right? That's all they had. Then came the neoclassical theory by the human relations theory here by Elton Mayo. And the dynamic administration by Mary Parker Foley. She was only woman thinker we had. And these theories brought into focus the human aspect of organizations. That the human beings have a mind of their own, they are emotionally attached to the work. Anything which disturbs an emotion disturbs the work. So if you have to achieve efficiency, you need to take care of the psychosocial and emotional aspect of the human beings. Elton Mayo actually went further and said that we should proactively create what's called informal organizations within formal organizations. Earlier it was a very formal organization. There was what's called written communication, value neutrality, political neutrality. You had what's called scientific selection, scientific training, scientific placement. All these things made the human being a machine. There was no human aspect. So everything was on structure. Now they are looking at how an informal organization can kind of help in achieving the efficiency, effectiveness, and economy in the organization. So that's the neoclassical theories. They are basically classical in nature, but they kind of slowly introduce this human element in there. That's called human relations theory by Elton Mayo and the dynamic administration by Mary Parker Foley. Then came two major thinkers, Chester Bernard I don't know why it's not writing properly, Bernard and Henry Simon. Now these are thinkers who brought the concept of human relations in a further way. That is, behavior. How is this going to affect the efficiency, effectiveness, and economy of the organization? How human behavior is very, very important. And Bernard is a person who classified, who actually gave the best definition of organization. He said that organizations are not physical structures with consisting of hierarchies. He said organizations are social structures with consisting of dynamic human beings. So a big shift in the change. And he actually brought in the concept of organization, where he said that organization when does an organization come into being? It happens when two or more people come together with a common objective or purpose and cooperate communicate and cooperate and communicate with each other and to achieve and this happens in a voluntary manner. This happens in a voluntary when two or more people come together with a common purpose. So there's a common purpose for the organization, and they cooperate, communicate, and what's this? Next C is there. So cooperate and communicate to achieve a common objective. Then an organization is formed. Right. So this was the definition given by Chester Bernard, and he said that this is not a physical hierarchy. These are dynamic human beings. Right. So if you just go into the organization also, you'll understand where these theories come from. I'll just go there also. So when you study public administration, they say there is a difference between public and administration. And if you study administration, you need to study what is an organization. So organization, according to Chester Bernard, has what is called objectives. Right? So below the objectives, you have what's called planning, because there will be unlimited objectives, but their resources are limited. The resources are limited, so they have to plan to get the best output. Then comes division of labor. So everybody talks about the division of labor, because there are so many activities to be done, and these activities have to be divided among people. And this division also gives rise to what's called specialization. Some people will become more specialized in their work. Right? And to fill up these places, you have what's called hierarchy. And because there's a hierarchy, you need to fill up people. So you have to select or recruit. Recruit people in the organization. Right? And then after recruitment, you can't simply leave them like that. You need to train them. Right? After training them, you need to place them in the right man for the right job. So the correct fitting has to happen. Placement has to happen. Now, with all this, the organization does not, so with the cooperation, communication, etc., the organization does not complete its work. It has to have a budget. So budgeting has to happen. There has to be money. And when budgeting happens, and the planning is based on this budgeting, then you have what's called implementation. Right? And once implementation happens, you have what's called an evaluation of how the policy went, how was it implemented. Now, this is essentially the structure of the organization. And when you put people in all these places to do this work, then it becomes what's called administration. So organization and administration, organization is a physical structure. Administration is the people filling up these positions in the organization. So these classical theories made this into a physical structure. The neoclassical theories and behavioral theories made it into what's called a human structure. That's the difference. Where you have to treat human beings according to Mary Park-Foley. Human beings are intelligent, capable, and responsible. Whereas in the classical theories, they were not considered like that. Right? And even behavioral theories. Behavioral theories also, when Henry Simon started off, he started with a value-free organization. That is, value-neutral. Neutrality was considered very important. Then when he came with this decision-making theory, he modified it. So because you're all trying to make the science of administration. So these classical thinkers, everybody was trying to make what's called a universal theory. A universal theory and a science of administration. So it started with Woodrow Wilson, who's the father of public administration, but everybody. And then post-behavior, after that, there's something called comparative public administration also, which looked at what is called ecological studies. Ecological, where you have Frederick's ecological studies. So this is the ecological approach. Now, where does the system theory and contingency theory come from? So before learning that, we need to understand that this most important theory was the bureaucratic theory by Max Weber. And so because of Max Weber and because the whole world adopted the Weberian bureaucracy, we have something called pre-Weber and post-Weber. Pre-Weber is because there were many thinkers, even 100 years before Weber, who talked exactly what Weber talked about. The only thing is that Weber made a systematic study of bureaucracy, whereas these theories, the thinkers did not. These thinkers like Hegel, then Karl Marx, then Mosca, Wilfredo Pareto, then J.S. Mill, etc. So these are the you call it pre-Weberian bureaucratic narratives. Right. And then you have something called post-Weberian developments also. Because the Weberian bureaucracy was all about value neutrality. You do all these things, that is scientific recruitment, scientific training, scientific placement, etc. Then what's called political neutrality, then value neutrality. Then what happens in written communication, impersonal orders, etc., etc., etc. What it makes? It makes man into a machine. So because this was adopted across the world, it got what's called reactions. So in 1968 is the first time when Waldo and his group of young thinkers came out publicly at the Minnebrook conference in New York and said that value neutrality is an impossibility. We need to have values, which means what? We need to be earlier they said it's only the politician who can have. So they call it politics administration dichotomy. So this is the biggest feature of what's called the classical theories. Politics and administration are separate. Only the politician can have values and facts, or facts and values, based on which policies are formed. And administrators have to implement it with the help of what's called rules and regulations. He cannot look at values. So this is the reason why there was a reaction, and we had what's called the post-Weberian developments. The first post-Weberian development was called New Public Administration. After that, we had New Public Administration came out and said that value neutrality is an impossibility. You need to have socially relevant value systems. Equity. You are bringing equity in, and you have to have relevance for this public administration. So if you need to have relevance, you need to bring in equity. So the new public administration was the first reaction. Then came the public choice approach. Because in new public administration, when you bring in value neutrality, it's basically what you're saying. When you bring in values, basically what you're saying is you're bringing in the bureaucracy to do the administration. And when the bureaucracy becomes the dominant form, then they become they lose what's called goal displacement. They will make rules and regulations, the means as well as the end, and resulting in what I call as Operation Successful Patient Diet. So there will be corruption, there will be nepotism, etc. So people don't get choices. So that's why the public choice approach came into being, where they said that the different thinkers like Pat Buchanan and all this said that you allow people to get the choices for goods and services. It can be government, it can be private sector, it can be NGOs, it can be clubs, it can be anybody. You allow the people to choose because they are rational. They can prioritize who will be the best at what cost, and quality at highest quality at best cost. So they'll be able to rationalize and select. So that's the public choice approach. Then came what's a reaction to the public choice also, in a sense, was the new public management, or the new liberal policies of the new rights movement in the West, in the US. Ronald Reagan and what's called Margaret Thatcher. They implement what is called the new public management, where in England it was all about privatization, what's called the purchaser-provider relationship. So even if you go to a national health system, there will be a purchaser in the form of government, and somebody else provides those benefits. For example, running a lab, it's not done by government. You allow it to be done through the private sector. So in the UK, it was more about privatization, and the US, it was more about what's called rethinking governance. So what Ronald Reagan told his people was, perform or perish, which means that they had to go through a rethinking of the government. That's based on a book by McLevy, who said that government can become entrepreneurial. And you had different forms of government in the rethinking governance part. Consumer-oriented government, customer-oriented government, result-oriented government, direction-oriented government. Different things were there when we discussed what's called the new public management. And then came new public service, which is an entirely different approach. And now we have what's called the good governance. So these are the reactions to the Weberian bureaucracy post. And now we come to the systems theory and contingency. I was trying to place the theories of administration, in its context, because you need to understand it as you proceed with your understanding of public administration. So the systems and contingency theory are a slightly different approach to organization. So system theory, general systems theory, owes its origin to the famous biologist Ludwig von Bertalanffy. Ludwig von Bertalanffy. Herbert Simon also used the systems approach in his decision-making theory. And Fred Rix is the dominant figure among those who have preferred the general systems approach to study of comparative public administration. So everybody is using the systems approach. So if you look at, apart from classical theories, the behavioral theories, the post-behavioral theories, etc., are all basically systems approach. We are trying to subsume all those theories within the systems approach. It basically says that organization is about systems and different systems interacting with each other as a whole. So without a problem. So this efficiency becomes established over error and trial and error method. And finally, you will have a organization whole where different subsystems interact with each other. And if you remember, we talked about what is called organizational theories as being what's called as the closed systems approach. So all these theories are basically closed systems approach. Closed systems approach, or you can say what's called the I forget the name. So the other was the ecological theories of comparative public administration, where we said the various subsystems of administration will affect the organization. The closed system was saying that none of these subsystems will affect the efficiency of the organization. Whereas in ecological theories, they say that all the subsystems of administration, like political subsystem, social subsystem, cultural subsystem, economic subsystem, technological subsystem, communication subsystem, all these subsystems will affect the efficiency of the organization. So this was called the situational design theory. So if you could say most of these theories are in a system way, and possibly the ecological theory, which is basically the comparative public administration, is the contingency model, which is called the situational design theory. So you could say that most of these theories fall into the system theory, and the contingency theory is basically the ecological theory, where the subsystems affect the organization. So definitions of a system are a set or arrangement of things so related or connected as to form a unity or organic whole. So different subsystems, it's like the jigsaw puzzle. You put it together in a proper way, it becomes an organic whole. You can see a picture on it, and you will basically try to put it in such a way that it fits in properly. Robert Dahl says any collection of elements that interact in some way with one another can be considered as a system. And the concept of system involves the study of parts of a system, interaction among such parts, and interactions between system and its environment. So look at this. Look at this last portion. So what we are saying is that, one, there's a suprasystem. In the suprasystem, there are subsystems that interact with each other. And this third thing is that these subsystems interact with its environment also. Right? So the concept of system involves the study of parts of the systems, which are called subsystems. Interactions among such parts, and interactions between the system and its environment. So that's the system study. So system theory is also known as a modern organization theory. So systems approach has focused attention on the organizations as systems. So basically, earlier it was about either the human beings or the looking at it as machines. You're not looking at a system. These human beings are meant to do this kind of task, and they'll be paid according to the task. The only incentive is more money. Give more money, there will be more production. Or productivity depends on more money. So the systems approach is focused attention on the organizations as systems, which means there will be subsystems interacting with each other, subsystems interacting with the suprasystem, and the suprasystem, the whole system, interacting with the environment. So an administrative organization can have three distinct elements. One is called the inputs, and of course throughputs, and definitely what I call outputs. Inputs, outputs, and between there's something called throughputs. Inputs largely take the form of both human and material resources. So the factors of production, basically land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, etc., comes in, right? Land. So if you look at this, so it will be land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Land and capital are material resources. Labor and entrepreneurship are human resources, right? So these factors of production is basically what you call the inputs, and the output. And the organizations transform these inputs into products and services, which are called outputs, using internal, social, and technological processes. And the input to output conversion is known as throughput. So the ability to do it in a better way, you'll say it is a better throughput. And if they take long time, if it's an inefficient thing, you'll say the throughput is not good, right? You'll say for internet, you say the throughput is not good. What do you mean by that? That is, it's not consistent. Internet, the throughput is not good means the internet is inconsistent. Sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low, sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it allows you to stream videos, sometimes it allows it only to do word work, etc. Do it data entry. So similarly, so input, output, and what's called throughput, right? So what happens? We said there's a system, there's a suprasystem. In the suprasystems, there are jigsaws available. These are called subsystems, which is political subsystem, social subsystem, economic subsystem, organization subsystem, economic subsystem, technology subsystem, communication subsystem. All these subsystems are interacting with each other, right? Or you take an organization. Let's say you are selling a product. So you will have in the organization a production team, right? There's a production team. So this is one system. Then you will have an administrative team to take care of the salaries, etc. Then you will have an accounts team. Administrative team to manage an accounts team. Then you will have a technology team, right, to take care of the technology. Then you will have a training team, right? All these have to logically interact with each other to make this whole subsystem. So, and then this organization which is interacting with each other also need to interact with others. For example, they have to interact with other vendors. They have to interact with government. They might have to interact with other private sector. They might have to interact with international organizations. They have to interact with other countries. So all these interactions happen when this whole system tries to deal with the world, right? So the organizational systems are open to their surrounding environments from which they obtain their performance information called feedback. So when the product or service reaches the intended audience, they have to get a feedback. And it can happen from government, it can happen from private sector, it can happen from NGOs, it can happen from clubs, it can happen from volunteer organizations, it can happen from citizens, whatever it is. So this feedback It's important to keep it on course with regard to its goals, and we said, common purpose or objective or common objective, and to evaluate the performance of the organization and subunits. So when you get this interaction, when you have this interaction, you get what is called the feedback. And the feedback further loops here to see which subsystem actually performed to give this feedback. Right? So was it, if the feedback, let's say, of the product or service is poor, that means either the product is poor or the training is poor, whatever. So then you'll have to put more attention to the product or training. So it's used to keep the system on course with regards to its goals and to evaluate the performance to the organization and its subunits. So the external environment, so I said that the supra-system I called as the whole system. Its external environment of the organization is called the supra-system. So basically, you have the system, the subsystem, and you have the supra-system. So the subsystems, there will be subsystems, they will be interacting with each other. The subsystem also will be interacting with the system, and the system as a whole will be interacting with the supra-system or the environment. So the external environment of an organization, internal environment is basically what's called the subsystems. The external environment is called the supra-systems. So basically, you can put it like this: system. So the internal organization is called the subsystems, and the external environment, so internal environment is called the subsystems, external environment is called the supra-system. Right? Please understand the systems approach. It's like this. Right? So what are the components of organizational systems? So within the organizational system, several subsystems or structures are at work. Each subsystem carries out a required set of activities. There can be a production subsystem, a supportive subsystem, which is advertising, public relations, etc. Maintenance subsystem, which is about personnel management. You can have adaptive subsystems, that is planning and research and development units are example, which basically adapts the organization to the requirements of the market. The managerial subsystem is very important, concerned with controlling the other subsystems, coordinates the activities of the other subsystems and allocates resources among them. It relates external conditions to internal goals and requirements of the organization. Managerial subsystem has a major role, and it is basically the what's called the touching point for the external environment and the internal subsystems. Right? And besides the above, there's something called a psychosocial subsystem, which is about the human being. We are not considered, so far we have considered what's called the organization as a structure. Now we are looking at the organization as a social structure. The other one as a physical structure. So earlier, if you looked at the organization, it was as a physical structure with what we call hierarchies or subsystems. And now we are looking at the organization as a social structure consisting of dynamic human beings. Dynamic human beings. So this is said by Chester Bernard. This is basically a classical approach. That is, an organization is a physical structure consisting of hierarchies. So that's what we said. Now we're saying the organization is a social structure consisting of dynamic human beings. So this dynamic human being has emotions, have anger, have values, have love, affection, you name it, all those emotions will fall in. So it's identified with the people in social relationships. So these people interact with each other, right? They try to find commonalities among people. They try to interact with other organizations. So it's identified with people in social relationships in organizations. So as we said in social structure, there will be a formal organization and an informal organization. And as Elton Mayo and Chester Bernard and all of them said, that we need to nurture the informal organization. Informal organization is somewhere there. There's an informal leadership. They may get together and say, okay, this is apart from the union. The union is again a formal structure outside the organization. And they may become a member of that organization, but it's not part of the. But this is within the organization. Within the organization, there is an informal organization, which the formal organization needs to nurture. Only then the organization will survive, according to the behavioral thinkers. This was unthinkable in the classical era, when they said that, human beings are machines. It's a mechanistic theory. You give them more money, they'll do more work. Nothing more. You're not supposed to talk to each other. You are supposed to have informal relationships through written communication, value neutrality, political neutrality, mention anything. Very, very difficult for the human beings to survive. Right now, you are talking about human behavior and human beings at work. So these subsystems are likely to have different and somewhat competing priorities and ideologies supporting them. So what happens? Look at any organization. So let's say you have a chairman and managing director. Below that, let's say you have 3 GMs, general managers. So this will be general manager operations. It will be a general manager production and a general manager of finance. Right? The general manager operations and general manager productions, they want to put maximum money in the product or service. But the finance system, they want to do it at the least cost. So there's these subsystems. So this is a subsystem, this is a subsystem, this is a subsystem. These subsystems have different priorities and ideologies. The finance subsystem says, do it at the least cost, the best quality. These guys says, unless I pump in money, I can't have the best quality. The production guy will say, I need more people and more money for marketing, etc. And finance will not agree. The efficiency of an organization depends on how these subsystems interact with each other. A system views, we recognize that a major change in one system of an organization will have a significant effect on other subsystems. So let's say a very proactive GM of finance comes here. His activity is definitely going to affect all the subsystems. Any change anywhere, and these are changes are not brought about by the system, changes are brought about by human beings, dynamic human beings. So the system view recognizes that major change in one subsystem of an organization will have significant effect on the other subsystems that's affecting the entire system. So this suggests the interdependence of the various parts of the system. So we've been saying that the subsystems interact with each other. So what happens is one organization can be part of a bigger organization or societal suprasystems. So for example, Department of Education is a unit of the Ministry of Human Resource Development, or a school is part of the Department of Education. The Ministry of Human Resource Development is a large suprasystem. So each level includes those below it, and interaction and interdependencies exist among all levels. So system levels, you say, take the example of schools. So let's say high schools. So above that, above the schools, there will be a directorate of schools, school education. And above the directorate, there will be a Department of Education. Right? And see, and the schools have to interact with them. The director has to interact with the departments have to interact with both, right? And director of school has to interact. So there's a constant interaction happening. And what we talked about was one organization. But one organization, so take the organization as school. But there are different organizations to which it is attached. So that interaction also happens. So each level includes those below it, and interactions and interdependencies exist among all levels. So each level includes those below it. So what are the limitations of the system approach? It's basically no theory, because all the theories are systems theories only, mostly. If you take the classical theories, the neoclassical theories, the behavioral theories, the post-behavioral theories, etc. Now, post-behavioral theories I have not mentioned. It's about motivation, it's about leadership, decision-making, motivation, morale, and decision-making. Leadership, decision-making, motivation, morale, and leadership. So, all these theories are basically system theories. The classical theories, the neoclassical theories, the behavioral theories, and the post-behavioral theories, and the post-Weberian bureaucratic initiatives. All post-Weberian developments, all systems approach basically. This is no virtual theory. It deals with what? Complex. So you can't call it a universal theory also, because things are changing. It's complex. It has no predictive value. Too abstract to provide specifics for solving organization and management problems. Because organizations are rapidly changing, right? They can't fully adapt to the rapid changes in this environment as the systems approach requires it to do. For example, Nokia was producing these handsets, or you call them feature phones. Right? Suddenly, the shift happened towards what's called the smartphone. And Nokia was not able to adapt to this because it's a sudden and rapid development. All those who adjusted to this fast became smart. They were able to survive in the market. Nokia was not able to survive in the market despite being the number one mobile phone maker in the world. They did not see the change happening coming. Similarly, BlackBerry. The BlackBerry phone was at some time the phone of choice for businessmen. But they did not see the impact of Apple coming through what's called an app-based system. And BlackBerry went into oblivion. Right? So an organization can never fully adapt to the rapid changes in its environment as the systems approach requires it to do. System approach says please rapidly adapt. Adaptability should be the key. So that's a limitation of the systems approach. So the advocates of the systems approach is basically trying to do what? There are different theories: classical theory, human relations approach, humanistic theory, post-behavioral theories. All these theories, they are trying to unify. And the systems approach is not opposed either to the classical theory or the human relations theory. They are only trying to bring in a method to the madness in a sense. Right? So advocates of the systems approach have viewed it as a way to unify the different divergent administrative theories that preceded it, whether it be the classical theory, the human relations theory, that is classical theory, neoclassical theory, behavioral theory, or post-behavioral theories. All these theories. And it's not opposed to any of these theories, or the human relations theory. They're trying to combine it, unify it, to get the best organization that can be efficient, economic, and effective. So the systems approach had accepted wholly the traditional theory components, that is formal structures and technological aspects of organization, and human relations component, which is social, psychological variables of organization, and integrate them. So the system theory is trying to integrate, I told you this, is trying to integrate the classical theories with the behavioral theories. And it also adds the environment, the ecological part. to this. So it says that, there are systems, subsystems, and system, and the system interacts with the ecology. It's called the suprasystem, and all these depend on each other for resources, right? While both the traditional and human relations approach provide partial analysis of organizations, the systems approach helps us to have a total view of the organization. No doubt about this. It shows that organizations are structures, but they are also composed of people. So the two schools of thought. One said organizations are physical structures consisting of hierarchies. This is the classical approach. Second is organizations are social structures, not physical, consisting of dynamic human beings. So now this is the behavioral approach. This is a classical approach. What is the systems theory trying to do? Trying to combine classical plus behavioral. So it shows that organizations are structures, but they are also composed of people. So it considers the organization as well as its component parts, and also the suprasystem, which is the environment in which it operates. The particular environment, or social, or psychological, or environmental, or technological, or communications, or economic, whatever. So these are environments around which it functions. You can't have an organization in isolation. You can do that in Mars or on the Moon, but on Earth, it has to definitely interact with this environment. Right? So it is useful to analyze the internal and external relationships of an organization. So that's where the systems approach comes from. What is contingency theory? It's basically a systems approach only, but it's called the situational approach. So far we had theories which are called closed systems theories, and then we had what's called open systems theory. Closed systems theory, or organizational design theory, or this is called the situational design theory. All the theories that I talked about, the classical, the neoclassical, the human behavioral, post-behavioral, are all closed systems theory. Until Fredericks came and said there is something called a situational design. That's depending on the situation throws up leadership, situation throws up environments, situation throws up decision points. Right? So the contingency theory says that. So it's simple here. That is, the organization that a school has, that organizational structure may not suit that of an office. Or let's say the office has a particular structure that may not suit the method of the army or the defense forces. Or the organization structure of the army may not suit the organization of our space scientists. Each organization has different systems, different approaches, different situations. So based on the situation only, you can have these systems operate. So it's not debunking the organization theory, saying that systems are very important, right? It's not debunking the systems approach. It's only saying that these systems change from organization to organization. That's all. As simple as that. It implies that the appropriate organizational design or management strategy depends upon the unique circumstances and features of the particular situation facing the organization and the manager. Right? So let's look at an example. Let's assume that you are the chairman and managing director of a handicrafts development organization, right? Now, there you are dealing with the artisans. You're dealing with artisans who are not educated, but you give you the very beautiful items. Now, you can't have a very sophisticated system. You can't tell them, use 3D printing with the artisan. Slowly you can introduce. You will have a system which is consistent with this level of the artisan. But at some time, like I came with the organization and said we can use 3D printing, virtual reality, augmented reality, etc. But I had to change the organization to suit that thought process. And we had also trained the artisans in a different way. So the approach had to change. Situations change because people bring in different ideas and thought process. The innovations bring in different thought process. So situations keep changing. And because situations keep changing, the organizations also keep changing. That's the exact meaning of the sentence. As the situation, so the organization. It implies that the appropriate organizational design will change, the management strategy will change, depending on the unique circumstances and features of that particular situation facing the organization and the manager. So when I joined the Tamil Nadu Handicrafts Development Corporation, I found that everybody had treated this post as a punishment post. So officers never used to come to office. They used to sign files at home. They used to take the driver and the perks of the organization. But they did not put their heart or mind into the organization. Not many of them. Some were brilliant, but many people never, even ventured because they thought that they were, stationed or put in a place where there was not much work. When I came in, I found that this was affecting the objective of the organization, which was to have the artisans. So that's the time I brought in huge changes, brought in technology in every aspect of the organization, such that we had to undergo changes in both the organizational design and the management strategy. So I had to choose 4 pillars of administration, to design, 3 production, and 4 marketing. Administration was about paper, sending paper. It used to take around 40 to 45 days per average for a production or a procurement decision to be made by the CMD. I brought this down to this 45 days. We brought it to less than 40 minutes. So using an ERP, decision making became online, paperless. Design was basically by hand, right? So design was basically the artisans were using the hand, and it was difficult to do this because it's a very costly process to especially do what's called the miniatures. So we brought in what's called the 3D printing. 3D printing, or what we call additive manufacturing, 3D printing. And I also created what's called a design, research, development agency using new technologies in design, so that the artisans can be saved. Some of the items are repetitive. You want to give a gift for weddings. The family which is conducting the wedding want to give a return gift. They don't care about the quality, etc. They want small things. So there we can use mass production techniques like 3D printing to do this. Then production, I had to bring in around 20 crores of rupees from Government of India and put it here. And we had to change the entire organizational structure to have a general managed production. Then marketing was completely through showrooms and through exhibitions. We brought in e-commerce, boompuhar.com. So the entire design and the structure had to undergo change because I was as a leader coming in and changing the entire situation and the approach to obviously suit the organizational goal of helping artisans. So what happened is the organization also improved from a turnover of 30 crores in 42 years to around 70 crores in 44th year. Right? So this is the kind of change that a leader can bring about. So this is because there's a contingency approach that he can make changes. Right? So contingency theory emphasizes that many factors such as technology, science, environment, strategy, etc. affect the organizational structure. A church, a business organization, a government agency, a college football team are not expected to use identical patterns of organization and identical strategies. It will all change from organization to organization. So the organization is also not expected to retain the same structure over time. So as I said, it will keep changing according to the leadership, while changing in other ways. Structures can vary from situation to situation depending on a number of variables. But mostly I believe this depends on the leadership and the ability of the leadership to think big or small. See, for example, you take the example of Wipro. Wipro was in the process of what is called IT. So Wipro is generally associated with IP, but Wipro has units on lighting. Is generally associated with IP. It has units on, but Wipro designs units. It has units on lighting. Different things Wipro work on. It diversifies on different things. Diversified areas. Diversified creating best quality products and services in each of this. So organizations don't remain the same; they keep changing. And also structures can vary from situation variables. The moment the ERP, the computers have come in and internet has come in, what has happened? We have now paperless offices. Now post-corona, it's called the new normal. People have got used to meetings over Zoom or other similar Google Meet or Microsoft Teams, whatever. But all these are changing. A simple virus can bring about such a huge change. So contingency approach marks a radical departure from the traditional approach that emphasizes generally the one best way. So the organizational system theory say one best way of structuring organizations in all situations. So there is one best way. Every organization can look the best in this way. The contingency approach really says there's no one best way. It all depends. The contingency approach is related to the systems approach, obviously, but we are taking the systems approach to a wholly new level. And contingency system approach has emerged out of the systems approach. They have accepted the basic tenets of systems approach. They accept the basic feature of the organization, that is, organization environment relationship and the dynamic nature of organization. So there's no difference. There's no difference of opinion on that. However, they feel that systems approach is too abstract to apply for managerial. Why do you have an approach at all? So that managers can take best action, efficient action to have efficiency, economy, and effectiveness. So what we are saying is that the system approach can be modified, or this can be modified by modifying the system's framework and translate into what's called an operational framework. So both approaches are related, but they differ in certain contexts. What are the comparisons of systems theory and contingency theory? The model of the human being itself changes in both. The range of activities of human beings is different under the two approaches. Systems approach usually employs a richer model of human beings than the contingency approach. The contingency approach, the systems approach takes into account the full range of human behavior and the organization, while contingency approach by and large is interested in structural adaptation of organization to its task environment. So the contingency approach is more related to the task at hand and the context and how do you adapt to it, right? Sorry, in that sense, the organizational it's a lot more focused compared to the systems approach. Whereas a systems approach, you are trained to kind of manage the whole organization. Here, you're possibly specializing, right? There are a broad range of activities. Here there's more specialization because you're trying to adapt to a new situation, right? Therefore, contingency theorists talk mostly in terms of structural change in the organization in response to a change in the environment. So the supra system undergoes a change. So you have to undergo a design and strategy change in your structure. Second, organizational variables. Systems approach is very broad in considering the organization variables. It tries to cover personal, social, technical, structural, and environmental variables. Whereas, therefore, managing involves establishing relationships among these variables and considering them, taking action in action. Contingency approach, on the other hand, concentrates on structural adaptation of organization to a new situation. So this approach tends to predict the ultimate outcome of a disturbance of the organizational equilibrium by change in the task environment. So because there's a change in the environment, the organizational equilibrium is lost. And because the organizational equilibrium is lost, you have an outcome which can be predicted. That's the contingency model. The contingency approach recognizes the interrelationships and interactions between the organization and the environment, but it goes one step further and relates the organization to specific organizational structures. The contingency approach concentrates on structural adaptation of organizations. It helps to explain variations in organization structure. When you design an organization, so when you go to government, you want to change it because the situation, external environment has changed. Generally, there's huge resistance. The government does not allow you to change the structure.